The anomaly was 4 lines long. I almost filed it under clerical error and moved on. I was doing a decommission audit on Sector 9 Gren, one of those quarterly sweeps the Remembrance Archive runs on legacy colony records, the kind of work nobody assigns to the senior keepers because it requires patience rather than expertise. Pull the file, confirm status, update the closure date, reseal. I had 47 colony records to clear before the administrative day ended. Vethra Station, the Gren Passage outposts, and, at the bottom of the queue, the entry nobody had touched in 3 centuries, Dunavars Reach, compact colonial designation 9 Gren 7. I knew the name. Every archivist in the compact knows it, the way you know the names carved in the memorial colonnade outside the hall, not because you think about them, but because they've been there so long they no longer require thought. Dunavars Reach was lost in the 3rd passage collapse, 312 years before I was born. A transit gate failure during a resupply run sealed the approach corridor. By the time the compact cleared an alternate route, the colony had been dark for 19 months. The official record, 4,400 souls, declared lost in absentia, archive sealed by order of the Colonial Office, Year 7 of the Vel succession. The file had not been touched since. I opened it to confirm the closure date, mark it current, and move on. The beacon status field read, transmitting, active. I stared at that for a long moment. The colony's distress beacon, a legacy model, the kind the early colonists seeded at every outpost before the compact standardized its emergency network, had been broadcasting on its original frequency for 312 years. Not intermittently. Not at degraded power. Continuously, at rated output, on the same narrow band it had been assigned before the passage collapse. The archive had logged it as inactive at the time of the closure. Someone, 300 years ago, had filled in the status field by assumption rather than by confirmation. They marked the beacon inactive because the colony was dead. They did not check. They sealed the file, carved the names, and moved on, and for 3 centuries, the beacon transmitted into the dark on a frequency the compact had long since reassigned, forgotten, and ceased to monitor. I flagged the entry and reached for the escalation form. Then I noticed the second anomaly. The beacon's transmission log had been running, as expected, since the passage collapse. Thousands of entries, each one a time-stamped ping, each one unanswered, until 11 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days ago, when the log showed something it had never shown before. A response. Not from the compact. The compact's emergency network doesn't monitor that band. The response identifier in the log was a character set I didn't recognize, a 9-digit alphanumeric string in a format the compact has never used, followed by a short body of compressed data and a protocol header I had to read 3 times before I understood what I was looking at. It was an acknowledgement. A formal, procedural, by-the-book emergency response acknowledgement, issued by something called the Terran Survey Relay Network, Listening Station 7 Auriga, and addressed, with exact beacon coordinates and colonial designation pulled directly from the transmission, to Dunavars Reach, compact colonial designation 9 Gren 7. Earth had answered the beacon. I sat with that for a while. Outside the archive's clearstory windows, the morning light was moving across the pale stone of Dunvar's administrative quarter, the long slow shift from early blue to the warmer grey of midday. A supply barge was crossing the upper atmosphere, its transit line a faint chalk mark against the clouds. Ordinary. I remember thinking how ordinary everything looked. Earth. I knew the name in the way any educated compact citizen knows it, a minor notation in the xenographic catalogues, a species logged and assessed and assigned a standing in the compact's long hierarchy of known civilizations. Not a member of the compact's treaty structure. Not a signatory to any mutual defense instrument I was aware of. A species that had achieved interstellar travel within the last few centuries, with a reputation among the compact's frontier surveyors for building redundant systems, more sensors than necessary, more relay stations than any reasonable communication map required, more listening infrastructure scattered across navigational hazard zones than any other civilization of comparable standing. More, apparently, than we had. Because their listening infrastructure had been monitoring a frequency we'd stopped monitoring 3 centuries ago, and when our dead colony's beacon pinged on that frequency, their network had responded before any living member of the compact even knew the beacon was still running. I read the acknowledgement document carefully. It was formal in the way of a civilization that takes its own protocols seriously. The relay station had detected the beacon signal approximately 11 months and 3 weeks before the date I was reading it. The signal matched the station's distress recognition parameters. The station had, per its standing operating instructions, immediately classified the signal as an active distress call, logged the originating coordinates, assessed the nearest available response assets, and dispatched a survey drone, automated, no human crew, carrying a standard emergency response package to the beacon's listed location. No human in Earth's administration had authorized the dispatch. No human had known about it for nearly 11 months. The Terran Survey Relay Network had done what it was built to do, and it had done it alone. The survey drone had arrived at Dunavars Reach approximately 9 months ago. It had found, as I imagine it must have found, the remnant infrastructure of a dead colony, the beacon tower still standing, still transmitting, the settlement around it collapsed into the slow decay of 3 centuries without maintenance. The drone had conducted its arrival survey, found no survivors, found no active threat, found no immediate need for the medical or engineering resources it was carrying, and then done something I found more remarkable than any of the rest of it. It had not left. It had held position at the beacon coordinates, in accordance with its standing instructions for the scenario-type distress call. No survivors located, site not yet formally closed by originating civilization. It had waited. For 2 months, it had waited at the ruins of Dunavars Reach, running periodic scans, pinging the beacon in response to each of its outgoing pulses, and transmitting a standard holding notice on the compact's administrative frequencies, a notice no one in the compact had heard, because we were no longer monitoring those frequencies either. When no response came from the originating civilization, the drone had proceeded to the nearest compact-registered administrative world, which was Dunvar, and docked at our receiving bay. The docking request was in the queue. I checked. It had been sitting in the bay's administrative queue for 6 weeks, flagged as an automated foreign survey drone with a non-standard protocol header, assigned to the category cargo, identity verification pending, and left unprocessed by the bay's intake office because no one there recognized the registration format. 6 weeks. The drone had been docked at Dunvar's receiving bay for 6 weeks, and no one in the compact's administrative apparatus had processed it, because no one knew what it was. I called the bay. The intake officer who answered had the specific quality of voice of a bureaucrat who knows, the moment the line opens, that they have made an error. I ask him to hold the drone in place. I ask him not to file it under abandoned cargo. I told him I would be there within the hour, and I ended the call before he could explain the 6 weeks. The drone was smaller than I expected. A blunt cylinder, roughly the height of my shoulder, with a sensor array at one end and a cargo seal at the other. Earth's registration markings were along the upper surface, that 9-digit alphanumeric string, and below it, in both the compact standard script and in what I recognized as the survey relay's own notation, a line that translated approximately as, response dispatched per emergency protocol. Please confirm receipt. Inside the cargo seal, a compressed data package in a self-extracting format. The format was not one I recognized, but the drone had anticipated this. It carried a translation bridge, a seed file, the documentation called it, designed to establish a working interface between Earth's data architecture and any foreign system capable of basic information exchange. The archive's processing terminal handled it without difficulty once I fed it the seed file. Patient. The whole system was patient. It had been built to talk to people who had never heard of it, and it had brought its own dictionary. The package itself was substantial. A medical database, indexed, searchable, organized into categories I could follow once the translation bridge was running. Surgical techniques, pharmacological compounds, equipment schematics for manufacturing the relevant tools from locally available materials. An engineering compendium covering structural repair, environmental systems, water reclamation, power generation from the kind of sources a failing colony might still have access to. A series of what the documentation called field guides, simplified protocols for situations where trained personnel weren't available and the need was immediate. All of it addressed to the colonists of Dunavars Reach. All of it written for people who were 300 years dead. I sat with the terminal open for a long time, reading. Not because I needed to read all of it. I had already understood what had happened. But because the alternative was to file the intake form immediately, and I found I was not ready to do that yet. Earth's relay network had heard a beacon we'd forgotten was transmitting. It had classified the signal as an active emergency. It had assembled everything it had that might help a failing colony, not warships, not soldiers, not even a human crew, just knowledge, organized and indexed and addressed by name to the people it believed were waiting, and it had sent all of it, on its own, to a colony we had sealed in the archive 3 centuries ago. It had kept vigil over Dunavars Reach longer than we had. Its machines had kept better watch on our dead than our own institution had. Every 312 years of the compact's administrative silence on that frequency Earth's network had been listening. And when something finally spoke, it had answered. I thought about the beacon operator at Dunavars Reach, whoever had been on duty when the passage collapse happened, whoever had activated the distress function in those last hours, whoever had locked it to continuous transmission and left it running in the hope that someone would hear. I don't know their name. The archive sealed in Year 7 of the Vel succession doesn't record individual colony staff at that level of detail. Someone, in the last hours of Dunavars Reach, believed that the signal would reach someone who could help. They were not wrong. They were only 3 centuries early. I filed the intake form for the drone. I logged the data package into the archive under a new subcategory I created for the occasion, because no existing category covered the situation precisely. Third-party emergency response, unsolicited, colony no longer extant, materials received in full. I drafted the formal acknowledgement, the compact's acknowledgement of Earth's acknowledgement, in the procedural register the Colonial Office uses for treaty correspondence, because I could not find any other register that seemed appropriate. I confirmed receipt of all package contents. I noted that the colony had been sealed in the archive as lost 312 years prior to the date of Earth's response dispatch. I thanked them for their diligence in monitoring the frequency. I noted that the distress signal was now formally considered answered. Then I updated Dunavars Reach, compact colonial designation 9-7, in the archive system. The beacon status field had read transmitting, active for 312 years. I changed it to transmitting, resolved, third-party response received. I don't know if anyone at Earth Survey Relay Network will read the acknowledgement I filed. I addressed it to Listening Station 7 Auriga, because that was the return address on the drone's documentation, but I have no way to know if that station monitors the compact's administrative frequencies or if it will receive the transmission. I suspect it will. I suspect that whatever network built a relay system patient enough to wait 9 months at a dead colony for a response from a civilization it had never contacted, patient enough to dock a drone at a foreign bay and sit in the intake queue for 6 weeks rather than turn around, I suspect that network monitors more frequencies than we think. I suspect it has been monitoring them for a long time. I left the archive at the end of the administrative day. The memorial colonnade was in late afternoon light, the carved names in long shadow. I have walked past those names most of my working life and never stopped. I stopped that evening. I read the panel for Dunavars Reach, all the names the Colonial Office had been able to confirm, and at the bottom of the list, the standard notation the compact uses for the unconfirmed dead, and others not yet recorded. The beacon operator's name is in that notation somewhere, and others not yet recorded. Someone heard them. It took 300 years, and it was the wrong civilization entirely, and what arrived was not ships or soldiers but a database and a seed file and a machine that waited. But someone heard the signal. Someone answered. Someone filed the paperwork. I walk home. I did not tell anyone what I had found that day, because I did not know what to say. I still don't, entirely. But the following morning I submitted a proposal to the Colonial Office recommending a comprehensive audit of all legacy colony beacon frequencies, not just the ones in the archive, but the ones we had stopped monitoring, the ones we had reassigned, the ones we had quietly assumed were inactive because the colony was gone. The proposal is still under review. In the compact, most proposals are. Earthstrone is still in the receiving bay. I ask the intake office to hold it pending further instruction. I have not yet determined what instruction to give. The data package has been archived. The acknowledgement was transmitted. By every procedural measure, the case is closed. And yet, the drone is still there, patient, in the dark of the bay, the way the beacon was patient, the way the relay was patient. I find I am reluctant to send it away. It came a very long distance to answer a call no one alive had sent, and it would seem poor manners, now, to simply tell it to go.